All right, let's cut across now to some live visuals coming in from Paris of that massive protests of the Yellow Vest protests that are taking place and have been planned on the streets of Paris today. And this after there was no progress made to bridge the divide between the French Yellow Vest protesters and the government on the eve of a second demonstration in the French capital. Now, the protesters in France are angry at the high fuel prices, and these are fresh visuals now coming of those new protests a day after those failed talks. Meanwhile, the French authorities, of course, have been clearing pavements on the Champs-Elysees Avenue on Friday ahead of today's protest. But French authorities have, of course, tried to avoid the repeat of last Saturday when protesters violently clashed with the police and which had to fire tear gas, water cannons, rubber bullets on thousands of protesters who had gathered and also had vandalized restaurants and shop fronts at the Champs-Elysees. These protests are now just gearing up once again, and the police very cautious on what's going to happen next, as these protesters have continued their demonstrations against the government's fuel hike, particularly of diesel and petrol. And this has now spread to other countries as well. We've seen these visuals coming in from Brussels as well. And for more than a week now, the Yellow Vest protesters have blocked roads across France and stopped access to some fuel depots, shopping centers and factories in protests against the fuel tax hikes, which they say have eroded their spending power. And it's not, as I said, just Paris, but these protests that are now spreading to other areas like Brussels in Belgium. Protesters are angry about high taxes and the high cost of living, which has, of course, created traffic chaos in many cities across the world. And there's been a high visibility of these protests because of the yellow vest that they wear while blocking streets in Paris or otherwise as well.